Letters from the First World War, 1915. Here we read some of the many letters sent by staff of the Great Western Railway Audit Office at Paddington who had enlisted to fight in the First World War. Here you will find all the letters and hear transcripts from this collection that relate to the soldiers' experience of the trenches.
A Most Awful Time by Richard Frederick, 19th of June, 1915.
Dear Gerald, many thanks for the letter, which was somewhat a surprise to me. No, the news was quite fresh, as I do not hear from anybody in the office. We have just come from the trenches, where we were for 7 days, and had a most awful time. We were 3 days in the reserve, and put in the firing line, where we took part in an attack, and were also under a very heavy bombardment. I am sorry to say we had many casualties, 35 killed and 138 wounded, and I can assure you it was an experience I shall never forget. Anyhow, Williams, Kemble and myself came out quite safely. I have seen Frost out here. Of course his battalion are in the same brigade. As a matter of fact, they were in the firing line the night we came out. I received a letter while I was in the trenches from Mr. Slater. Yes, I heard about Chamberlain. Jolly sad, was it not? If you do hear from Dick James, you might pass any news on to me. Shall be glad to hear from you. I could write more, only am a wee bit tired after 7 days in the trenches. I am yours sincerely, Fred Hull. P.S. Of course you know my address. Remember me to all I know.
A Noisy Business by R.C.S. Frost, 15th of July, 1915.
Dear Mr. Hunt, many thanks for your welcome letter volunteering so much interesting news of friends at the office. I wrote to stand you just before receiving your letter, but no doubt a few more lines will be acceptable. Beaumont seems to be doing the best of us all. I saw Williams and Hull about 3 weeks ago in a small town near here. Of course, the Seaforths and our Gill always move about together, but we don't meet very often. I am glad to hear the old section is still in being, and not like the German Empire is fast becoming a thing of the past, and hope your 3 survivors will be allowed to keep the flag flying until the Wanderers return. I have been in the firing line several times, and at 4 different places, as well as being in the support trenches at others. I hear this is called a mobile division, which accounts for our gypsy life in France. Our last turn in the firing line, for 6 days and 6 in the reserve, was the most exciting of all. It has been a quiet place for 2 months, until 2 days after our occupation, when the British exploded mines under some workings of the Germans near their trenches, to prevent them blowing our trench up. Well, that woke them up, and the following Saturday they retaliated by opening rapid fire early in the morning. However, we were ready for them, and quickly replied, so they then bombarded us, which to say the least of it was a noisy business. That eventually ceased, and rapid firing was quickly in process again, followed by another shelling, which our guns again put a stop to. The whole affair lasted an hour and 10 minutes, and although we believe an attack was intended, the Germans didn't leave their trench, opposite to us. After putting our trench in order again, which took some time, as the parapet was blown down for about 3 yards near me, and a shell burst amongst a lot of beef tins, scattering them and the contents in all directions. Besides the bottom of the trench being littered with hundreds of empty cartridges, we proceeded with boiling water for tea, also to show the Huns by the smoke that we were still there. Only 100 yards separated the 2 trenches, so it was always a case of bob down, and the enemy were good shots, as we found out to our cost when they smashed the top glasses in 2 periscopes within half an hour one morning. At present, the division is resting, and I and 2 friends have erected a wee bivouac under an apple tree on a farm. It is quite cosy and fine weather, but last night it was raining hard for several hours, so we had to beat a hasty retreat to an old barn. There is plenty of fruit about here, but the water supply is very bad. Last Sunday morning we enjoyed our first hot bath since our arrival here, An old disused brewery has been turned into baths for troops. Also, underclothing is washed and disinfected, and kilts ironed there. 50 tubs are provided for washing, and 2 large vats filled with cold water to plunge into afterwards. I have not got any stripes yet, but have been studying signalling lately, so expect soon to be in the signal section. I must close now to get this letter away, hoping Mr. Taylor, Mr. Woodhams, and yourself are keeping well, and with kind regards to you all. Yours very sincerely, Frosty.
An Interesting Souvenir by Gilbert Williams, October the 7th, 1915.
Dear Mr. Hunt, thanks for the cigarettes and magazine. All very much appreciated, and I want to confess something. I am terribly short of cigarettes just now. Don't know how to get on, so you had Peter Jackson up to see you a short time ago. Lord, how I wish I could get up to London. Some of our chaps have leave, but this advance seems to have put a stop to it. That's the only reason I am sorry for the long-awaited advance. God knows it was really time we did do something, if only to relieve the pressure on Eastern Front. We are in this part of the line and are still sitting tight, worse luck. I wish they would get a move on here as well. It has cost us a good many casualties, but I think the Germans, what with the bombardment they got and the counterattacks delivered, must have lost many more than us. I have got an interesting souvenir. It is part of the framework of a German airplane, the 4th which our airmen have recently brought down in this neighborhood. The machine gun in one of our planes had killed the German pilot, and the machine, getting out of control, exploded, or at least the engine did, and the whole aircraft crashed to earth. God, it was an awful mess. Both the pilot and observer were killed, the former being bashed out recognition, but the latter survived the fall but died shortly afterwards. Our airmen seem to be the masters of the Germans now, although the Taubes seem to be the faster machines. Our men seem to have much spirit and initiative. About a fortnight ago, I saw a fleet of 14 of our planes cross over our lines on a raiding expedition. They were in close formation, and the Germans sent up a rain of shells without doing any damage. The raid was very successful, I believe, 2 transport trains full of German reinforcements being wrecked, a large station destroyed. Well, that's about all from me. Let me hear from you soon. How is everybody up there? Best regards to all the section. Yours very sincerely, Gilbert Williams.
Awfully Desolate Spot, a transcript from RCS Frost, 22nd of May, 1915.
I am much nearer the front now, and we moved here last Tuesday. It was a long march, and of course done at night, and our present billet is a farm, or the remains of one, in a large village about 3/4 of a mile from the trenches, more north than we were before, and nearer the Belgian frontier. It is an awfully desolate spot, constantly under shell fire. This morning I was trying to get asleep on the grass, when a shell burst in a tree, not 50 yards away, and sent a shower of leaves to the ground. Fortunately, no one was hit. Another burst in the same field 10 minutes afterwards. Then I thought it was time to shift. So went into a barn. There are a number of dugouts around, but they are so cold and you might get buried inside. The farm is a vile place, with a lot of stagnant water around, and a lot of German soldiers are buried here. The barn where we sleep would be improved if a shell struck the roof and ventilated it in our absence, as the smell inside is bad and makes it nearly necessary to wear a respirator. The rats seem to object to our company, as they often have a free fight on top of us. Last night was my first experience in the trenches, and we returned to billet this morning. The din is simply awful, and just lately the big guns have been giving the enemy beans every night. I am glad to say we had no casualties, although the rifle fire was heard at times, especially on our left, where the Germans made an attack on the Indian troops. The British gunfire was simply terrific, all night, and the Germans did not reply very much. It was fine to watch the flashes of our guns at our backs, although the screaming of the shells overhead is at first rather scarring, to say the least of it. However, the news we hear from day to day at this part of the front is very cheerful and encouraging. Yesterday, I came across an Indian soldier who could speak English very well, and he thought another month would see the war over. Also, a German officer captured near here said it could not go on very much longer. I, for one, hope these remarks will prove correct. The church here is practically demolished, just some of the walls and tower standing, and the churchyard is in a bad state. Great holes have been made and bones exposed. In these holes is water sufficiently deep to drown anybody. Great stone vaults have been opened, and coffins and bodies can be seen. Of course, the place here is not inhabited except by soldiers. I have been through some of the big houses, and plenty of good carved furniture, pictures, fittings, etc. still remain in them. I also have been in some of the gardens, and roses just coming into bloom can be seen in great numbers. I should like to see them at home. Well, I must close now, and hope you are all keeping well. Again, thanking you all for our good wishes. Sincerely yours, S. Frost.
Being Under Fire by Richard James, August the 10th, 1915.
Dear Burgee, thanks awfully for your letter. Glad to hear that you are all serene, and that the GWR is still flourishing without me. As a matter of fact, I expect it's better without me, but still there you are. By Jove! I had no idea that the audit had shoved so many fellows into khaki. It's fine. Well, the old brigade has had some pretty varied experiences in this land of stinks and bad beer. We landed at Havre last March, and after a freezing night under canvas on the heights behind the town, we had a rather weird train journey up country. There were about 10 of us per cattle truck with a few wisps of straw to sleep on. Our horses were box 6 in a truck, 3 with their heads facing the engine and 3 facing the rear of the train. 2 men sat on corn sacks between their bottoms. If they kept the shutters closed, they had a beautiful journey, as it was so warm with the horses. At about 2 in the morning, the old caboodle pulled up, and we thought we were in for a dreary hangabout. However, the order came down to bring out the Dixies and fall in for something hot. I took our one up, and the liquid smelled so good that with a little judicious wangling, we managed to get another one full. When we tasted it, it was simply gorgeous. Boiling hot coffee, and rum as only Frenchmen can make it. Gee, but it did go down a treat. While after many jolts and bumps, we arrived at our destination. It was miles from the firing line, and a fearful hole at that. At 9 next morning we were off again and went up further still, riding about 23 miles, before we came to anchor at a rather dirty mining village. After about 3 weeks in this show, we shunted up and got our baptism. It's a funny sensation being under fire for the first time, but it soon wears off. One gets a rather nasty jolt when the first casualty occurs, especially as it was, in our case, the finest fellow we had on the staff. He got a chunk of shell in the back of his neck and was killed on the spot. We were in action at this place for about 2 months and took part in several bombardments, one of them being the one in which poor old Joey was killed. We had some pretty rough times, but were very fortunate as regards to casualties. 2 months action and 2.5 days rest. It doesn't seem much, but that's what we got. This show had been occupied by the Germs and then by the French from whom we took over. The filth and stench was too awful for words. One of our batteries striking rather unlucky, coming across Germs buried just under the surface. The air was blue for miles. The next action we had was a hell of a show. The staff were put into a huge chateau, which was under observation and fire from 3 sides, and they didn't half sling the lead, about 2. It's marvellous that we didn't get lifted skywards heaps of times, but still here we are. After a good spell in this show, we came to rest again about 10 days or so ago. We're having a good time here in the way of concerts, sports, and boxing tournaments, etc. The latter was great, especially the bout between a farrier sergeant and a cook's mate. They biffed at one another until neither could stand. It was awfully funny. Little C.D. Ellis has got a snip job at a base. He came up today with a draft of men. He is having the time of his life and looks it by the dark circles under his eyes. I am feeling wonderfully fit and well, and would not have missed coming out for quids. I suppose you saw in the paper that 2 of our boys have got the Distinguished Conduct Medal. They were in Major Lord Gorrell's battery. He is awfully bucked about it. Well, old man, I must dry up. I hope you can read this disgusting scrawl, but we'll make that whiskered excuse of active service conditions. Please remember me to all the boys and tell Long Liz that I would give anything for a barrel or 2 of the club bitter. Sincerely, Dick James.
Canary in Cages. A transcript from R.C.S. Frost, July the 6th, 1915.
This trench of ours is a model in its own way, being fairly safe and connected by good communication trenches. The commanding officer's house of white sandbags is fitted with window, curtains and window box with pansies in it. It is furnished with table and chairs, also a large mirror. Of course, this is quite a one-occasion affair, and don't imagine we are here town planning with model dwellings, etc., but it will show you how soldiers can adapt themselves to circumstances. At the back of our trench is ripening corn and plenty of wildflowers in bloom. We have also canaries in cages in the trench, but these are used by the miners for testing the air in the mines after the explosion to see if it was possible to finish off their job. In the reserve or support trenches, fatigue work has to be done every night. Things such as carrying food, ammunition, material for the engineers to the firing line, so you can guess it is nothing but continual bob work.